Welcome to the world behind midnight. Some operations never appear on any ledger. Some assets never receive a name. Tonight's file was sealed the moment the last operator stopped transmitting, and what's left isn't a report. It's a warning. The mystery in the 37 seconds before the final radio blackout. The helicopter pilot transmitted a code that does not exist in any military communication manual in the world. 2 words, code Silver, and somewhere in a forest that JSOC refuses to acknowledge visiting. 6 of the most elite operators on the planet were about to learn that they hadn't been sent to recover anything. They had been sent to prove something would work. The flash priority transmission arrived at 2:14 local time, and it bypassed every standard routing protocol in the system. No unit designation, no coordinates on any officially mapped grid. Just a recording of the final 37 seconds of a military transport helicopter's radio feed, a set of sealed GPS parameters, and 2 words written in red at the top of the briefing document that Remington Potter read standing in a forward operating base that didn't officially exist. Code Silver. He had 22 years of black operations behind him. He had never seen that code before. The mission briefing ran for minutes. Helicopter went down. Crew status unknown. Black box transmitting from a location inside Transit Zone 4, a strip of Eastern European forest classified as a buffer corridor. Nominally uninhabited, technically unmonitored. Retrieve the flight recorder, confirm crew condition, extract within 90 minutes. Potter had run enough of these to know what the clean language meant. Whatever had happened in that corridor, someone above his pay grade wanted physical confirmation before they decided how much of it to acknowledge. He assembled his team in silence. Nobody asked questions. That was the first problem. Shane Wells picked up the anomaly at 400 meters from the landing zone. He raised a fist halt, and the column stopped. Potter moved up to Wells's position without a word, crouching beside the sensor operator as Wells pressed the directional microphone. Array toward a section of forest that the LiDAR unit, strapped to IR's 3 positions back, had flagged as clear. No thermal mass, no movement signature. Wells held up 2 fingers, pointed to his earpiece, then to the tree line. Potter put on the secondary headset, and heard, coming from approximately 40 meters into the dark, the sound of his own voice, reading the mission briefing, word for word. Potter pulled the headset off. Wells was already looking at him, not with fear, with the particular expression of a signals specialist who has eliminated every rational explanation and is now standing in the space where rational explanations used to be. Ayers came up on the left, and Potter held a hand flat. Stay still, stay quiet. The voice in the trees continued for 11 more seconds, then it stopped. The forest, which had been completely silent since insertion, resumed exactly the ambient noise profile it had carried before. Wind at tree level, the distant creak of branch on branch, as if something had simply pressed play on a recording of normalcy. Haley Randall had her encrypted tablet out. She wasn't looking at the medical display, she was on the intelligence partition, the one she'd opened during the helicopter insertion and had been quiet about since. Potter had noticed. He'd filed it. Now, as the team held position in a loose defensive crouch, he moved to her position and looked at the screen without asking permission. What he saw was a partial document header, Unit 0 internal classification, a biological asset category he'd seen referenced once before in a file he was told he hadn't been cleared to read, and 3 letters in a red field, SLV. She closed the tablet before he could read further. She met his eyes. She said nothing. The crash site resolved out of the dark at 300 meters. A medium transport helicopter, tilted 15 degrees starboard, largely structurally intact. Potter noted the rotors were undamaged. The fuselage showed no fire scoring, no ballistic impact points, no evidence of mechanical failure visible from approach. The aircraft had come down cleanly, which meant it had been set down, or something had brought it down without breaking it. What the team saw next, on final approach, reorganized every tactical assumption Potter had built the operation around. Both side doors were gone. Not opened, removed, torn from their mounts and placed, not thrown, placed in a neat parallel arrangement, 15 meters from the airframe, like furniture. Nicholas Britt was already up on the high ground 30 meters left of the site, his thermal scope sweeping the canopy. He reported nothing on thermal. The LiDAR registered a slow-moving mass at approximately 400 kilograms, circular trajectory, 200 meters radius from the crash site, consistent orbital speed. Ayers confirmed the readout twice. 400 kilograms. Moving silently enough that the acoustic array wasn't catching footfall. Wells ran a secondary filter on the directional microphone and pulled a faint rhythmic compression, not footsteps, but something close. An exhalation pattern, measured, patient. Whatever was out there in the dark was not agitated. It was waiting. P. Dakota Guerra had his back to the airframe. CQB barrel tracking the southern approach. When the first voice duplication occurred at direct range, it came from 8 meters inside the tree line due south, close enough that Guerra's body reacted before his brain did. Index finger moving to the trigger guard as he heard Potter's voice say, clearly, calmly, with perfect inflection, "Guerra, break south. 200 meters. I'll cover." Guerra held. He held because Potter was 6 meters to his left and had not spoken. The voice in the trees repeated the instruction. The forest was completely dark, and the thermal scope showed nothing. Wells had the acoustic data rendered on his tablet now, a waveform visualization of the voice capture, and he was shaking his head with the slow, specific motion of someone refusing to accept what their instruments are showing them. The vocal pattern was Potter's. Not a recording of Potter. The team had worked with acoustic spoofing devices before, tinny and approximate. This was a live reconstruction, real-time frequency matching. Tonal weight, the slight compression Potter carried in his larynx from a training injury in year 7 of his service. Something out there had heard Remington Potter speak for less than 3 minutes on final approach and had rebuilt his voice from the inside out. They entered the airframe. The crew, 2 pilots, were not present. No blood, no gear, no personal items. The cockpit instruments were dark, except for the black box indicator, which showed a steady green pulse, exactly as briefed. Randall was crouched at the cockpit threshold, running a forensic light, and Potter watched her face as she swept the beam across the floor panels. She stopped on a section of the floor near the pilot's seat. Whatever was there, she photographed it twice with the tablet, then stood and turned away before Potter could see the screen. The deliberate nature of the concealment, not rushed, not nervous, methodical, told him this was not her first time looking at evidence she'd been instructed not to share. Britt's voice came across the internal flat, clipped. The effect of a man reporting meteorological data. "I have eyes. 250 meters northeast, canopy level. Pair of bioluminescent points, amber, approximately 3 meters elevation from ground. They are not moving. They are looking at this position." Potter requested a firing solution. Britt said, "Negative on the solution. Mass is not visible in thermal. If I shoot, I'm shooting at a pair of lights." The amber points held their position for 40 seconds. Then they descended, not dropped, descended, controlled, to approximately 2 meters from the ground, and moved to 200 meters, then 150. Still nothing on thermal. Still 400 kilograms on LiDAR. Wells pulled everyone's comms offline. Simultaneously, a hard isolation command that took the team onto a local encrypted mesh, removing any external signal path. He had a reason. While they were inside the airframe, the directional array outside had captured 3 separate voice events. Ayers calling a direction check in his own voice, Randall requesting a grid confirmation in her own voice, and Guerra counting to 5 in his own voice. None of them had spoken. The Silver-Class asset Wells didn't know that term yet. He was simply calling it. The thing had sampled every voice on the team within 45 minutes of contact, and was running active simulations. It wasn't disorienting them. It was rehearsing. The midpoint came when Ayers found the first of them. He had moved to the northeastern edge of the site to run a secondary LiDAR sweep, and came back to the airframe at a pace that was not running but was also not walking, the controlled velocity of someone carrying information that changes the shape of everything around it. He had found a boot print in the soft ground at the tree line. Single print, bipedal, left foot, 44 centimeters in length. The depth of the impression. Ayers had a penetrometer on his kit. He measured it, indicated a dynamic load of approximately 400 kilograms on a single stride. It was not hunting them. It had stepped out to the edge of the tree line once, at some point before their arrival, and looked at the landing zone. Then it had stepped back, and it had been there ever since. Britt fired at 3:52. He made the call himself. The amber points had close to 100 meters, and the LiDAR mass had stopped its orbital pattern and oriented toward the airframe. He placed a .308 round through the center point between the 2 bioluminescent eyes at 112 meters. A shot he could make asleep. The suppressor cut the report to a low crack. The amber lights went dark for 3 seconds. Then they returned. Same elevation, same spacing, same slow pulse rhythm, and from the tree line, in the same flat, uninflected tone Britt used when he reported targeting data, they heard his own voice say, "Ms. Jenna Ball was not on this mission. That is the detail that matters. Her name appears in the pre-mission communications log as a 7th operator assigned and then pulled. Medical hold," the paperwork said. But Wells, running a full diagnostic on the acoustic capture log at 4:07, while the team held a defensive perimeter around the airframe, found a voice event time-stamped 12 minutes before their insertion that didn't belong to any of the 6 operators present. A woman's voice, captured by the directional array on a pre-deployment calibration sweep, saying a single sentence with the flat clarity of a radio check. "They're already in the zone." The voice matched no one on the team. It matched the personnel file photograph of Jenna Ball, and Jenna Ball was in a medical facility 3 countries away. Potter made the call to retrieve the black box and extract. Clean, fast, minimum contact. Randall already had it. She'd pulled it from the cockpit mount during the forensic sweep and had not mentioned this. She handed it to Potter without being asked. He looked at her. She said, "You need to open it before we move." The instruction was stated, not suggested the register of someone operating on a separate briefing. Potter opened the case. The black box housing was intact and transmitting, but the interior of the transport case was carrying secondary cargo that had nothing to do with flight data. 6 restraint collars, military-grade electronic, with frequency receivers, 3 pre-filled syringes in a biomedical foam mount, industrial-grade sedative, the dosage marked in milligrams that corresponded to a large primate, and a single laminated card. The laminated card read, "Exercise hollow signal phase 2, behavioral assessment, asset response to Tier-1 contact, combat effectiveness, metrics, vocal mimicry, deployment, thermal countermeasure, utilization, isolated target extraction, team composition, 6 operators, mixed specialization, evaluation status, ongoing." At the bottom, in smaller text, Unit 0, UCB, subdivision, asset, Silver-Class, unit designation, SLV-1, handler status, embedded. Potter looked up from the card. He looked at Haley Randall, and understood, with the particular cold clarity that arrives when a career's worth of institutional trust collapses in a single second, that she had known before the helicopter lifted off what this operation actually was. Guerra disappeared at 4:19. No contact, no distress signal, no shot fired. He was on rear security, 3 meters from the airframe, and then the LiDAR registered a sharp mass displacement, a fast, controlled movement, and the acoustic array captured a single sound, the creak of vertebrae under compressive load, clean and mechanical, lasting less than 1 second. Then nothing. The amber points were no longer visible in the tree line. Wells swept the directional array in a full arc. The forest was silent in the specific way it had been silent on arrival. Not the natural silence of absence, but the deliberate silence of presence, holding its breath. 5 operators. The LiDAR registered no external mass. 400 kilograms had simply ceased to be detectable. Britt took the second extraction route without orders. He had already mapped it, which told Potter that Britt had been operating on contingency plans he'd built himself. Which told Potter that Britt had also suspected something was wrong before the mission launched. Potter didn't stop him. The team moved in a tight 4-person formation, Wells at the electronic array, ears with the LiDAR active, Randall carrying the retrieved case, Potter on point, moving northwest at extraction pace. They were 200 meters from the landing zone when Wells raised his fist. Halt. He turned slowly, headset pressed tight, and pointed behind them. Then he held up 4 fingers, then changed it to 5. Then looked at Potter with an expression that translated, without language, 2. It is counting us. Ayers was gone 11 minutes into the extraction movement. Same as Guerra. No distress, no shot, no sound, except the acoustic signature of a spinal compression event captured on Wells's trailing microphone, lasting 0.8 seconds. The LiDAR showed nothing. The thermal showed nothing. 3 operators and a case of instruments that proved they had been deployed as live targets. Wells was running the acoustic data continuously now, not for detection, because detection had proven irrelevant, but to monitor. And what the waveform was showing was a pattern he couldn't explain away. The Silver-Class asset's vocal rehearsal had shifted. It was no longer running individual voice simulations. It was combining them, layering Ayers' vocal signature over Potter's tonal bass, with Guerra's rhythmic cadence as a secondary beat. It was constructing something composite, something that didn't belong to any single person. Britt made the extraction LZ with 4 minutes to spare, and was waiting at the northern edge of the clearing when the composite voice came from directly behind him. Not from the tree line, not from elevation, but from 2 meters behind him at ground level. In open terrain that his thermal scope confirmed was empty. The voice said, in a layered harmonic that carried 3 separate vocal signatures simultaneously. We're clear. LZ secure. Bring them in. He turned. He saw 2 amber points at 3 meters of elevation in open space. No thermal mass beneath them. No LiDAR registration. He raised the point 308 and heard himself say, in his own voice, from his own throat, without choosing to speak, don't. Potter reached the LZ at 4:44 with Wells and Randall. Britt was standing at the northern edge, facing outward, rifle at Lordy. He did not turn when they arrived. He did not respond to Potter's challenge code. When Potter moved around to face him, Britt's eyes were open and tracking, alert, functional, but he did not speak. Wells ran the acoustic array at Britt's position and pulled a continuous low-frequency signal emanating from Britt's general direction, not broadcast outward, but a standing wave, like a frequency being held in resonance, like something had placed a signal inside him and was holding the key. Britt looked at Potter. He opened his mouth. What came out was not his voice. It was the composite. All 6 of the team's voices, simultaneously, layered and balanced, delivered in a single exhaled sentence. Tell them the asset performed as designed. The extraction helicopter landed at 4:51. Potter and Wells boarded. Randall stopped at the threshold of the aircraft. She looked back at the tree line one time, with an expression Potter would spend the following months trying to categorize, not regret, not fear, something closer to professional acknowledgement. Then she boarded. Britt remained at the edge of the LZ as the helicopter lifted. He did not attempt to board. He did not signal. He stood with his rifle at his side, facing the tree line, and the last image the helicopter's onboard camera captured before the aircraft banked northeast was Britt standing motionless in the clearing, and behind him, visible for exactly 1 frame before the camera angle rotated to amber points at 3 meters of elevation, and below them, for the first time since the operation began, a thermal signature, vast, patient, present. The flight back was 41 minutes. Potter and Wells did not speak. Randall had the retrieved case on her lap and was completing a form on the encrypted tablet, a standardized document. Potter could see from the format, the kind filed after a controlled operational trial. He asked her one question. He asked her whether any of it, the mission parameters, the crew, the deployment of 6 operators into a transit zone with a live Silver-Class asset, had ever been intended to end differently. She finished the form. She submitted it. She closed the tablet. She looked at the window. She said, the assessment metrics were all within projected range. Then she said nothing for the remaining 37 minutes of the flight. Outside the window, the forest below was dark and featureless, and Potter kept his eyes on it, knowing something was down there that had heard every word they were saying and was filing it away in a laryngeal structure built for perfect recall, against the next time it would need to sound like someone who wasn't afraid. 3 operators never came home from Transit Zone 4. The official record lists them as absent. Without leave, a designation that requires no investigation, no next of kin notification beyond a sealed letter, no public acknowledgement. Nicholas Britt's personnel file was closed the following morning. Dakota Guerra and Ion Ayers were transferred, on paper, to a training rotation that no one in their chain of command can locate. The Silver-Class asset designated SLV-1 has no public record, no biological classification in any accessible database, and no confirmed operational history. What exists is a single field note recovered from Shane Wells's sensor log, recovered because Wells submitted it personally, against the instruction of everyone above him in the chain. It reads, "Acoustic assessment complete. Subject demonstrates full-spectrum vocal reconstruction, composite layering, and behavioral analysis capability. Recommend immediate containment review. Subject is no longer responding to handler frequency. Subject is listening to something else. The case is sealed. But the file exists, and you've seen it now. Subscribe to The World Behind Midnight to uncover the next operation before it disappears. Because some secrets are best left behind midnight."